Hello, and welcome to Sustainable Outlook, a podcast from global law firm K&L Gates, where we discuss the transactions, technologies, and trends in the sustainable economy. We hope you enjoy this discussion. Please reach out with suggested topics or guests, or questions about how we can work together to create a sustainable economy.
Welcome to Sustainable Outlook. I'm Elizabeth Crouse, partner and co-lead of the Power Group at K&L Gates. In this episode, I interview Elizabeth Jones, who is the co-founder of the Equality Equation, an organization in Baltimore that is working on comprehensive and realistic community development programs in the Baltimore and Virginia areas. Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining us today. To kick things off, could you please tell us a little bit about why you're so passionate about the work that the Equality Equation is doing?
Well, first of all, Elizabeth, thank you for having me. It's great to be a part of this conversation with women such as yourself. So I'm really passionate because what we're trying to do in the Equality Equation is transform the lives of individuals and communities that have historically been underserved, marginalized, and in so many ways neglected. So we're here in Baltimore, Maryland, and the Equality Equation is a socioeconomic development model that is really citizen-centered. So instead of your big box development anchors, our development anchors are intended to heal the community and the individual. And so our three anchors are workforce development, health and wellness through federally qualified health centers, and then sports and recreation. And so ultimately, what we want to see is not only the environment being healed, but the individuals in the community as well. And so we believe that the way to close the racial wealth disparity gap is through home ownership. So ultimately, we want to see people be homeowners, work, live, and grow in their own communities. And so we kind of look at all of the resources, subsidies, and we work with a host of partners to bring wellness into the community. And so, if anyone knows anything about Baltimore, Baltimore is a phenomenal city, but it has its share of challenges, and blight and poverty and crime is in that list of things.
Thanks, Liz. I think the concept of citizen-centered development is really interesting. Can you walk me through a little bit about how you approach the process when you're really thinking about citizens first and foremost, how you approach the development process specifically?
So my background is I'm a systems engineer turned educator, right? And so my education environment was not traditional. So I come out of corrections education for 20 years, almost behind the fence, but 20 years in total serving inmate populations. The one thing that I have found is that what it takes to really see somebody's life transformed coming from corrections and using education and work skills training. Those two things coupled together, studies show, make a huge impact in the life of the individual. Well, the issue is that we look at kind of prisons as being often on the side, when in truth, prison, education, healthcare, housing, access to finances, all of those systems that serve some communities kind of really work to marginalize others. And so when we say citizen-centered development, we want to help the individual right where they are. So that includes workforce development training that results in industry recognized credentials. But we don't measure workforce development training success in program completions. We measure it in gainful employment. And then we want to see people move to family sustaining wage earning jobs. And then hopefully we provide and offer workforce development that can really help support somebody through a complete career life cycle or on a career trajectory. And part of that is that we want to get people to work with the idea of being homeowners and not hit a glass ceiling where the community that they come from that has been neglected, they have to now exit, but to bring that community up so that you can live with dignity and humanity safely and prosper in place. So the idea is that it is citizen-centered, but by transforming the lives of the citizen and the community residents, then you will also see the transformation in the community as well. So it's a big lift, but no one does it alone, not the citizen and not us. We work in concert with a whole host of people: government, private industry, nonprofit, community development corporations, nonprofits that really come in and help to lessen the obstacles for people, right? So a lot of times stuff like childcare, transportation can be a real hurdle, but sometimes it's just not having the skills to know how to navigate difficulties that come up in life and letting that impact your employment. So it's really about coming up alongside people where they are and helping them kind of understand their potential and giving them, not saying, oh yeah, it's over there for you, but really walking them through that process. So that's what we mean when we refer to citizenship.
So you've talked about a lot of different organizations, a lot of different stakeholders, and frankly, a lot of different people working together to accomplish the community development. You know, it sounds a little bit like being a lawyer and herding cats for a living. How do you do that? And who needs to be the first mover here? Is it government? Is it private industry? Is it nonprofits? How does that work? And who needs to take the lead?
You know, that's such a really big question, right? So government's responsibility is to do this kind of work. But coming out of the federal government, what you realize is that a lot of times government is kind of broken. And so what its stated mission is, sometimes when you look at what it puts its effort, energy, money, and time and resources into, doesn't kind of line up with the mission. Or sometimes, and I used to say this a lot in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, especially when I got to the national level and managing national programs, I used to tell them, so what we don't have speaks to what our priority is too. So by that, I mean, if there isn't somebody who's over instruction or curriculum, but you're dealing with the education of thousands of people, you might have a problem with curriculum and instruction. So with government, a lot of times it's well-meaning, but due to bureaucracy or red tape or just kind of broken systems, it doesn't get the ball rolling. We in private industry help to kind of inform some of the places where government has been stagnant. And it isn't because people don't want to see change or don't desire to be effective in what they do. But what we found is that private industry like us, so my husband's background is construction, mine is education, with a lot of, systems and project management from a really big level. And so us coming in with the equality equation, what I call the marriage between industry and education, working with government like Baltimore city government, where we're in Virginia, Greensville County, Syracuse, New York, you find a real willingness to partner with private industry because the need is there. And then we also have nonprofits who I think have filled a lot of the spaces historically that government couldn't touch, but their struggle is always, they know the people, they know what works, but then funding becomes an issue. If government funding gets cut, then their ability to impact becomes cut. So after a while, you find that there's this whole concert of people working. And what happens is that private industry looks at bottom line, but we're also really kind of in a great season where people are starting to get it, that there does not have to be a separation between the bottom line and social impact. The two things coexist. And so when we start looking at that, then government, private industry, nonprofits really do work wonderfully in concert. And then there are some other institutions that we work with. So we work with a lot of post-secondary. So we work really closely with Virginia Union University, which is a historically Black college and university. And when you have leadership like President Lucas and Vice President Taylor, like at Virginia Union, people who are passionate about the work that they do, they're progressive in the way that they do it. They know how to serve their base, which is their students, but then they also see the need to expand and serve their surrounding community. So Equality Equation is also working with HBCUs to take this same model to the places where HBCUs exist. So when you say kind of who moves first, that's hard to say, because I think once you start having the conversation and you see how everybody has the same goal in mind, but everybody can't lift in the same way, you realize, well, if we all kind of lift in concert, then we see tremendous impact and tremendous change. in the lives of the individuals we're all trying to serve, and we can expand upon who we're serving.
The strategic alliances are so important to actually create change. I think it's really frustrating to hear people talk about who's gonna pony up the money, who's gonna are you gonna get the permits first and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
When really it takes a lot of teamwork. I think you pointed out also with private industry and employment, things are changing where a lot of private industry is starting to see the value of social impact. We've had this wave of ESG style, environmental, social, and governance style investing and product development and so forth over the last 10 plus years. And it's really starting to come to a head. One of the things that I think is really interesting about how you all are approaching this is you're not content to just think about sort of traditional jobs and traditional workforce and traditional communities and so forth. You all are really very forward thinking, like many of the players in private industry right now. You're really thinking about emerging technologies and industries. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how those choices are made? So obviously there's a little bit of risk if you're looking at industries that aren't quite established yet, but hold a lot of promise.
So I think we want to see workforce development training that we do today have the ability and relevance to take people through 20, 25, 30-year careers. If they never chose to go back and do another day of professional development or workforce development training, that they could still really live a different kind of life based off of their investment right now. And you're right, it's a business mentality type of thing. So you're always trying to figure out, how can I get out ahead of the curve? And so with that, understanding that we're kind of in this fourth industrial revolution and understanding that there's this real pivot to technology. I mean, it's not current, it's been happening for a while. The speed of it is becoming insane. But, this idea that us coming out of COVID now, and I won't even tell you that there are times where I get groceries delivered 2 times a day. Why? Because when you would typically run back out to the grocery store, I'm still in the kitchen doing stuff. And so the convenience of that, Amazon, and this idea of light manufacturing, production technician, logistics, and understanding skills that come out of those industries that aren't emerging but are vastly expanded. So we have that, but we also focus on what our business on the construction side, when COVID hit, it slowed, but it never stopped. So anyone who's in an industry that moves earth, that tears down and builds up, knows that, there's going to be fluctuations and variables, but that business is really solid. And so that's kind of our perspective on training, is that we want it to be that people who are low on hope, if they make the investment of time, energy, effort, and sacrifice as adults to return to the learning process, that they really see great returns on it. And so we are looking at fields always that are up and emerging, and, sustainability is a huge part of that. And so what are some of the areas that really allow us to see that play out in the life of the individual in their career path and in their career field? And so that's why I love the fact that when we talk about that you included equality equation in the discussion of sustainability, right? Because it is about broadening this thing out. And so construction people and education people then have to look at, what are some of the other areas? Okay, so assembling solar panels and light manufacturing and 3D printing of one of the partners that we have, female-owned, minority-owned small business that manufactures and retrofits bus stops with technology. And so, it seems far-fetched, but when you drive around Baltimore, I remember saying to my husband, and this is when Baltimore was in the news really heavy, and, it had been mentioned by former president that who would want to live in Baltimore? And I remember driving through the streets and seeing people, and I was like, what could easily look like loitering if you didn't know what you were looking at are people waiting at a bus stop that the only way that you know it's a bus stop is because there's a pole with a sign on it. And so to see a company come up that just wants to bring kind of some dignity and technology to that serves the community and the individual, But she also does workforce development training to teach people how to do large scale 3D printing. I mean, so the innovation that's out there makes it really boundless as to what we can look at. And the beauty is that because we can write workforce development training programs with industry in mind. So they're industry informed and industry led. And the industry says, oh, hey, and by the way, off on the horizon in the future, these are the skills that we'll need. And this is the kind of workforce development training we want to see, to have someone walk in day one and be competent and confident. And so, that's always kind of our walk, is to really be informed by industry and let industry lead. And then we come in with workforce development programs that meet their need.
As you alluded to a minute ago, sustainability is a really broad topic, right? And when we're thinking about social sustainability specifically, we also very much need to think about equity, which is really the bottom line for you all, right? You're trying to achieve equity, but it's also an evolving area. Where do you think we're going to be in 3 years? What's everyone going to be talking about in the context of sustainability, or more specifically equity, if you'd rather?
It's funny because we've had this conversation so much about the evolution of certain discussions, and equality for us is all about access, right? So, nobody can legislate what's in somebody's heart, right? But we legislate areas that need protection and cover. And I'll tell you, when you go back and you look at clips of Martin Luther King speaking after he had kind of done his big work, and to hear his frustration that still remained, I think that 3 years from now, even in the evolution of the discussion around equality, that there may still need to be discussions around economic equality. And part of that is because we live in a society that was based on and formed by its inequality. And part of the inequality allowed us to grow so much as a young nation and kind of become world leaders in such a short period of time. And when you begin from there, and so many of your systems and policies and practices, societal norms support keeping a group in a particular place for a number of different reasons, then I hope that 3 years from now, one, maybe as a nation, we've actually had the frank, transparent, real conversation around reconciliation. And the only way that we can deal with reconciliation is to have the hard conversations. And those conversations aren't just race, but kind of all of the systems that have led to support it. And sadly, have also snagged brothers and sisters that are not Black. There are even white people in America that fall into that net, but have never been able to see themselves through a certain lens. And so the idea is that we believe that what the equality equation offers, it can be seen anywhere poverty exists. So if it's on a reservation, if it's in Appalachia where people are living in abject poverty, if it's in Baltimore or Detroit or rural America, that one, we will have gotten to the place 3 years from now where we could have had the conversation. And two, that we will take our eye off of the distraction that just says it's race, but also broadens that out so that people who are affected by poverty, who might not be Black, can see, oh my gosh, that we need some solidarity in this so that we can really strike a blow to this thing and move beyond it, So who knows, after we finish with like race and poverty and all the economic inequalities, then maybe 3 years or 30, we can actually start like the conversation around sexism. Because I think that conversation goes way deeper than the others, right? Because we can latch on to race and religion and poverty, but when you start talking about the issues in gender, we really go down. And then we won't even get into the conversation that goes to our new context, which is even beyond gender, where it's genderless, but we are still dealing with gender roles, right? So we have a lot of work to do individually and collectively. But I also think, I think one of the great things about being a co-founder in the equality equation is that myself and Plus, we get to have great conversations across the color line and across socioeconomic strata and people really do open up. And the one thing that we find over and over and over is that it doesn't matter kind of where people are on the spectrum. Everybody agrees that there's a problem. Everybody wants to help. And the one thing that we believe that the equality equation does, whether you're the person in need or whether you're the person with resources that wants to help and can't figure out what to do with that, is that the equality equation helps bring all of that together so that people who really have a lot can see their resources make an impact in the life of those people who really have the need. So, hopefully 3 years from now, wouldn't it be great to not even need these conversations? I used to say to my students all the time in the classroom, because there was this misconception that the reason why I came to work every day in a prison was because it was for the money. And I had to tell them all the time. So, I left being a systems engineer to be a teacher in a prison. So this isn't about money. But I used to tell them a lot because studies show that children of the incarcerated are 70 times more likely to be incarcerated. But I used to tell them, my hope is that you won't let me get to retirement, that my presence won't be needed, that there would never be another generation in my family that would ever need to come in here and do this job. And so I say the same thing about where the conversation will be 3 years from now. So in my utopian world, and it's probably the only utopia for me, it would be that there would be no need for the conversation because we have collectively struck such a blow to the inequalities, to the disparity, that communities that have lacked resources and dignity and safety have it.
Liz, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. This has been wonderful and illuminating.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainable Outlook. To listen to past episodes and receive notices for new episodes, subscribe by searching Hub Talks, that's HUB Talks, in your favorite podcast app. We hope you will tune in next time to learn more about the outlook of the burgeoning sustainable economy.